and welcome to my Gemini appreciation video. I wanted to make this video because I feel like Gemini is a very misunderstood sign, and actually in Vedic astrology I'm a Gemini, which was a little bit of a identity crisis for me because I mostly follow tropic and I identify as a Cancer. But I've come to realize the more I study Gemini and this energy is that I embody a lot of this in my everyday life, and I was doing things not really even putting two and two together that's like a Gemini trait, right? So anyway, we'll just jump right in. I've been studying astrology probably for like 8 or 9 years now, and what sparked my interest about it is I just want to give you a little bit of background. This one guy I was briefly talking to, he was a Gemini rising actually, but he asked me when my birthday was. Like, I didn't know anything about this subject, and I'm like, well, okay. He's like, oh, you're a Cancer. He's like, well, what was your time of birth? Like, he looked up my whole chart, and when he was breaking down, I didn't really understand, like, you could have different signs and different planets and all that. So when he was reading my chart to me, I remember this as clear as day. It was like my Venus in Cancer, and one of the traits was could feel jealous when feeling insecure. Like, say your boyfriend's flirting with someone and you start to feel really jealous, and you know that trait. And for me, that's something I do struggle with, and I find it to be a negative trait. But to him, he was like, ooh, sexy. You know, so I was like, how did you know that about me? That was what like sparked my interest. But that taught me in that moment something that you see yourself is a negative trait. Someone else, it could be a turn on for someone else. So the right person's gonna like even, you know, the not so great things about you, that might be a positive to them. So that's a little lesson I learned in that moment. I just wanted to share. But he's what got me into astrology because it just sparked like a fascination within me, and I wanted to learn more, you know? I just feel like the more I learn about it, the more I'm like unlocking the secrets of the universe, and it can be compared to like human psychology almost, because you'll, you know, observe how a certain sign is acting and why they're doing it, and it just makes so much sense. And if you actually talk to a real astrologer, you know, it's so complex and so intricate. They'll be like, okay, well, your Uranus trines your third house in the 3rd degree. Like, it's so complex. I don't understand all that, but I do know a little bit, so I wanted to share that with you today. I also feel like when people talk about astrology, some people can be very judgmental, like they can't wrap their head around it, or they don't care to understand it, so they just throw it out automatically, or they say it's witchcraft. That's like my favorite. Or they say crystals are witchcraft. And it's like, literally, crystals are so beautiful. They're gifts from God, from the earth. And if you think crystals are witchcraft, don't use your cell phone. Don't use your computer. Don't read the quartz clock on the wall or your watch, because that's all powered by piezoelectric energy, which is clear quartz. When you apply pressure to clear quartz, it creates an electric current, which is making all your stuff work. So don't use your cell phone. Don't watch this right now, like on your cell phone. You know what I'm saying? Okay, let's get to the point of this video, which is Gemini energy. So anyway, Gemini is represented by the twin in astrology, right? And they'll say, now this is where I think it's misunderstood. Some people say there's a good twin and there's an evil twin, and that's not necessarily true. I feel like it's more the twin represents duality because it's the Lover's card, so you have the male and you have the female. You know, the twin, one can be more feminine, one can be more masculine. And a good example of this, I don't really like celebrities, but a good example of this is Angelina Jolie, because I feel like she can be very masculine, where she's rolling around on the ground, shooting, you know, she always has a gun on her leg, and doing martial arts. She can look very tomboy, but at the same time, she has this feminine side, where she's on the red carpet looking absolutely beautiful. All the men are in love with her, but, or she's a mother, she can be very nurturing. That's more feminine, right? So it's kind of like you have this duality of the masculine and the feminine energy. So Gemini is the twin, so there are two of you running around. And because Geminis get bored very quick, and I realized that I was doing this. So my whole life, I actually have 2 names. I have my birth name, and then I have Katie, right? And it's like, some people know me by my birth name, some people know me by Katie. And I feel like I've come to make 2 different personalities out of it, almost like an alter ego type thing. Like, think like Hannah Montana, right? Which, that baffles me, because all she does is take her wig off and no one can realize that that's, you know, her. But anyway, that's what I'm meaning. So there's 2 of you running around, right? So yeah, there's 2 different personalities. Whereas Katie, I would say Katie's more masculine. She's in the gym, she's lifting heavy weights, sometimes heavier than the men. I would say she's more of like a man-eater. She'll tell you off real quick. It's kind of a more masculine energy because that masculine side has to protect the feminine, right? So sometimes when that twin comes out, that's where Gemini gets their, crazy. It's because like, who are you? Like, you're acting like a completely different person. And sometimes I feel like it's because they want to protect their feminine, right? But then you have my other twin, my real birth name that runs a hair salon. She's more feminine. She's maybe more submissive and soft with men. And the things that I post on, like, say, my fitness page for my business, I would never post on my Facebook, the separate business I'm running, the beauty salon, So it's like two different energies, and I keep them separate. But if you're a Gemini and you're a twin, there's two of you running around, so you can make twice as much money. Well, this twin can make this money, and this twin can make that money. So anyway, it's kind of like having a double life. Not necessarily double life a bad way where it's hurting someone, where, oh, I have a family and wife down in Florida, and then I have a girlfriend up in... Do you know what I'm saying? It's nothing like that. Well, it could be, but... that's kind of like living a double life. And a good example of this is my ex-boyfriend. Like, I'm just thinking back, like, he had a Gemini moon, and he would work in Chicago all week during the week, and I loved it because, like, I like my space. I'm like, okay, like, great, go, and I can watch, like, Housewives. I don't have to hang out with you during the week. And then he would come home on the weekend. So it's kind of like you're, in two places, but you're living two different lives, and then... but the thing about Gemini energy is they want to have that security to come home to. And I remember I was working in a salon at the time, and the receptionist was like, kind of giving me the side eye when I said, oh, my boyfriend's in Chicago all week. She's like basically insinuating like, oh, well, be careful because he could, what if he starts cheating on you? And it's like, so first of all, I'm so intuitive. I would just know. And second of all, I just never got that vibe from him. Like, he had his space. He, like, couldn't wait to see me on the weekend. And it was me that was the problem. I'm like, oh, well, why don't you just stay in Chicago all weekend? Like, why did you even bother coming home? Like, I don't know. I just, what? I was never really in love with this guy. I was young. I didn't really know what it was like to be in love. So that's a whole nother story. But anyway, just give them their space. They're always going to want to come back because they want that security. They want something secure to come home to. The secret to a Gemini, like keeping a Gemini man, is that you have to give them their freedom. If they ever feel like their freedom's being taken away, they might, be disloyal, or they might bounce from the relationship, right? But that's where they get their bad reputation from, is that they're cheaters. It's like, it's not necessarily that they're cheaters, it's just that they never want to, or they can't commit. And it's because, like, say, you're thinking about, okay, I want to get married, but like, what if I want to move to Africa tomorrow? I can't just pick up and do that. Like, they feel like their freedom is being, like they never want to be like locked in a cage, right? And will they move to Africa tomorrow? No. But they're just the idea of it, the walls are closing in, they feel like. So when I think about a Gemini, if I'm just going to jump into a Gemini's brain, I think of them as Gemini is the gem, multifaceted gemstone. And if you've ever seen like a stone like that turning in the light, and off every angle, here you are. You are Gemini. You're such a little gem. But off every angle of the gemstone, the light is reflecting. And I feel like that's how their brain is. There's always like different sparks going off, and they're thinking about like a million different things at once. Like right now, I could be making this video talking to you, but in the back of my head, I could be thinking, okay, well, I got to do A, B, and C. And if I leave by 2 o'clock, I could be at this point, that point, and then they could be thinking of like a completely different fantasy in their head at the same time. So I feel like there's always like a million different things going on in their head. How you spot a Gemini is like they could be talking very fast like this. Not necessarily always, but I can always spot, like, see, if I have a Cancer in my chair and they're talking a lot, like a mile a minute like this, I'd be like, okay, well, they must have Gemini in their chart. Usually it's a Gemini moon, and sometimes they could be talking so fast that it's almost overwhelming where you need a break. Like, I'd be like, whoa, like I understand what you're saying, but it's like so, I would say intense. Like, the conversation's very intense, but they're very good communicators because Gemini is ruled by Mercury, which is the planet of communication. And if you have a Gemini that's not talking a lot, like they're more like reserved, it could be for one of two reasons. It could be because they have a Mercury, like how they communicate, the planet that their Mercury is in. Maybe it's in Cancer, and Cancer is the crab. Crabs don't have vocal cords, so they don't talk a lot, right? Or they could have like a Mercury in Taurus, which is like very slow, like they're going to communicate more slowly. Or it's because if a Gemini is not talking, very you know, matter of fact and very fast. It could be because Gemini embodies a lot of nervous energy, right? And this is the thing that Geminis need to know, is that you have this nervous energy is because like you have all these different things going off in your head and you're trying to keep them straight. And a good thing that you can do is like write down all your thoughts. So you know, because like say if you're thinking like say you have all these different things you have to do in one day, and if you start thinking about them all at once, it almost makes you a little bit nervous, like, oh my god, well, I have to get all this stuff done. If I don't get it done, like you know. So that's like an example of like what's going on in a Gemini's head, you know. So they almost have like this nervous energy about them, but don't confuse it with fear, because fear is false evidence appearing real. Fear is not real anyway. But don't be scared, right? Don't mistake your nervous energy for fear, is what I'm trying to tell you, little Gemini. You know who is the perfect example of a Gemini too, and this nervous energy is in the scene. And I always say this about Geminis, they make great attorneys because they have such a quick mind. And the best example of this is Elle Woods. And I even, like, from Legally Blonde, and I even Googled Elle Woods because I'm like, what is her zodiac? And she's a Gemini. It says like June 14th or June 15th. I'm like, that is so spot on. She's not a Gemini in real life like Reese Witherspoon, and like I don't really like celebrities, but I'm just trying to give you an example that everybody would know. And she's kind of like the twin because she's like this, you know, ditzy sorority girl that's like into hair and makeup and always like working out, wants to look good. But then she has this other twin that's just like a brainiac, like kill him in the courtroom type of vibe. So in that scene, I'm sure you know what scene I'm talking about. Like, she's very nervous in the beginning when she has to go represent, you know, the workout girl who was on trial for, you know, she was being accused of killing her husband. So Elle Woods, like, she's very, like, you know, she's very nervous. She's very nervous. And she kind of has to focus on one thing to, you know, she's like, okay, well, what did you do that day? You know, so she has this nervous energy, but if they like, you know, really concentrate on one thing at a time, and the way their mind thinks, like, you know, she's just quick with it. And she's just like, well, you washed your hair? And everyone's like laughing. And then they're like, I think we've, you know, come to the conclusion that she was in the shower. But that thing went off in her head, that little spark that's like, okay, what if you know, you can't get a perm on the same day because you're going to deactivate the ammonium thiglycolate in the hair or whatever. That, you know, I should know this because I was in cos school. But, yeah, you're going to deactivate the ammonium thiglycolate, and, you know, your curls aren't going to be... another thing I want to say about Geminis, too, is that the way their mind works is that they can almost play a scenario out in their head, like how it's going to go before it even happens, or... like say if they want to like and this is another thing, they're gonna circle back around. If you're talking to a Gemini, there might be all these different side stories, and then they'll circle back around to the main point, which is what I'm gonna do right now. And I feel like I do this a lot. Or they'll say long story short, but then they'll tell you the whole like story anyway. That's another Gemini trait. But so, and then they'll forget, and they'll be like, wait, what was I talking about? Just like I did right. Oh yeah, so in the courtroom scene, she's playing it out in her head how it happened. She's like, okay, but since you had enough time to stash the gun, and then she's saying like A, B, and C, so this is like how it went down. So she's telling the court how it happened. She doesn't even know this is how it happened, but this is how it happened, because she's able to play it out in her head step by step. And Geminis do this, especially in dating. And I realized that I do this. Like, I met a really nice guy, but I can already foresee how this is going in my head, so I can play it out in my head. I don't even have to date him to know how it's going to go. And sometimes, Gemini, you really just do have to give the person a chance, because if you don't, but they already know how it's going to go in their head, so why would I waste my time? That's a Gemini thing. Are you following? Are you keeping up with this video? And I feel like if you're following this video and you understand what I'm saying, you're probably a Gemini. I feel like I'm all over the place in this video, and I apologize. I'm sorry. I have this Gemini client, and I've been doing her hair since she was like a freshman in high school, and she's an attorney, and I remember like she's just so smart. I think she graduated like top of her class. Like I'm telling you, Geminis are so smart. They're the most quickest mind of the zodiac. And she graduated like valedictorian or something, and then she went off to be the school Baldwin Wallace. She was too smart to go there, so she went to Cornell, graduated probably top of her class. And then I remember talking to her, and she's like, well, I think I'm gonna go to law school. Like, she has this very sweet voice, high-pitched sweet voice. I'm like, of course you are. I'm like, I love this for you. But yeah, I think of her as a little Elle Woods. She's so smart. I literally was talking to her about she represents white collar criminals, and that's like I don't know. She's like, oh my God, you should see the schemes that these people come up with. She's just like, how do you come up? I'm like, are you fascinated by this? Like how people sit around and come up with these. So I feel like it's very like an intellectually stimulating job for her. But I'm like, give me your card. Her name's Kelsey. If you need representation, let me know. But I'm like, I could pass it out to all my exes because I feel like white collar criminals are attracted to me. I don't know what it is. But that's very important for a Gemini to be intellectually stimulated, especially, you know, I will say that's probably one of the signs that actually has to be intellectually stimulated to be in a relationship with someone. Like, because they're like I said, they're a brainiac of the zodiac. Their mind is like a sponge and they just want to absorb all the information that they can. And if you have to intellectually stimulate them to turn them on sometimes, right? They could date someone, the girl could be so pretty and gorgeous or whatever, but if they're not having that intellectual stimulation, they're going to get bored and be like, on to the next. So, and I'm teetering on a Venus in Gemini because it's like 3 degrees in Cancer. So there's like a little bit there where I do. And I'm going to circle back around to that one guy that taught me about astrology. It was like I wasn't really into him until he sparked like something that I was like, oh my God, that's really interesting. And then I really started to like him. So if you can teach a Gemini about a subject, even if it's something that they don't really know. I kind of just want to wrap this up and maybe touch on, you know, a few more like relationship things or, you know, Gemini qualities. But I will say, like, Gemini, just don't be boring. You know, if they're bored, they're gonna leave and they're gonna go find some excitement somewhere else, right? So you have to be, you know, a little bit fun. They're very fun. It's such a fun sign. I remember there was this one Venus in Gemini, and I don't want to say we dated because we never dated, but it was always like this unspoken, like we were committed without the commitment. And I just feel like it was like this unspoken thing. But if I would get mad at him and I'd be like yelling at him, he would pick me up on his shoulders and start spinning me around. I'd be like, put me down. But it was like, they're fun. They're fun as fuck. I don't know how else I can say this, that we were committed without the commitment. And to me, it was really comforting because he was always there. And I didn't think that he would stray. But at the same time, it was like we weren't together at all. And I don't know if anyone would understand that other than a Gemini or Sagittarius and be okay with it. But it worked. And I don't know. But, you know, I had that Sag moon, he had that Venus in Gemini, and it was just, the energy worked really well together. And that's another thing I like about astrology is, like, I can look at your chart and be like, okay, this is going to work well, but this is going to be a problem. Like, you can make it work with any sign, but you have to know where your pros and cons are going to be, or where your strong points and weaknesses are. Anyway, it's a very, like, a childlike, a curious sign, kind of like a Peter Pan energy, like I never want to grow up. And, you know, sometimes I'm like, oh, I kind of look like Tinkerbell today, you know, especially my jealous rage fits over my Peter Pan. But, what else do I want to say? Great matches for Gemini, I would say, could be another Gemini. Sagittarius is great because they both have like that freedom thing. I don't think any other sign would relate to the space and freedom quite like a Gemini and Sagittarius. I think that's very good energy together. I also think Gemini and Leo is such a fun couple. Gemini and Aries, because Aries gets bored very easy. And Gemini, there's 2 of them running around. So you actually keep Aries very like on their toes, which is hard to do. So I would say like Gemini, Aries, Leo, Sagittarius. Gemini is very picky though when coming to a mate, and they can have their list of things of everything they want, but then they have this other like list that's so like, well, you know, no, I can't date someone that drives that kind of car. Like they'll have their very like little picky things about them. So, and it could be like the dumbest thing, but that's like a no for them. So they're very picky. And another thing about Gemini is that they're very, their sex, like, they all have sex anytime, any place, you know, and they like to do it anywhere, right? And I would say, this is so funny, like, let me circle back to another ex. And just for the record, I've only really had 3 actual relationships, and I'm not promiscuous at all. Like, I have a very low body count, which people think Gemini is very, like, they'll just sleep with anybody, which some of them do. Some of them are real, you know, like having sex with everyone, but I'm not. I don't know, maybe that's more the Cancerian in me. But so this one guy, I was like totally in love with him, and we were driving from, you know, he was long distance, and we were driving. I had to fly to Mississippi, so from Mississippi, and we were driving to New Orleans, and it was a long car ride. There was no one around, right? No one around on this highway for miles and miles. It was just the road and trees, and I was just getting really bored, and I was like, hey, do you want to like just, you know, like, can I come over there, like straddle you, and we'll just... And he was being so lame, and he was an Aquarius, and he's like, oh no, you know, like, that's not a good idea. What if we get in an accident? I was like so bored. But I feel like that would be a Gemini's fantasy. Like if you're in the fast lane going like 100 miles an hour and like having sex at the same time. And I think that that's something Gemini would enjoy, because it's like fast paced, it's exciting, you're doing it, you know, anywhere, anytime. But he was being so lame, and this guy was an F-18 fighter pilot. I'm like, you know, you're flying these planes, you're gonna have people shooting at you and like bombs going off. You don't think you can handle this for 2 or 3 minutes? Like, yeah, I was so lame. It was so bored. I'm like, you know, yeah, if you really want to have fun with your Gemini, that could be a good experience. You guys are on the highway, and just you know, another thing that could turn them on, like, I don't want to say like teacher student, because that's a little, you know, sketch, but like say you're in a scenario where they're tutoring you on a subject, like the tutor, and then you start hitting on them, one thing leads to another, and then you're like doing it on the desk. I could see that being like exciting for a Gemini, because they're being intellectually stimulated at the same time, and then they're, you know, and I will say, the last thing I want to touch on is that Gemini, you actually really like drama. They'll say like, oh, I don't like drama. Yes, you do. But you don't like being involved with it maybe, but like watching it from a distance. My one client that was in just the other day, she has a Gemini moon, and I love when she comes in, because if I need to know something about a subject, she does that thing with her eyes where she's like, oh, well, and then she like rattles off all this information, and she's super smart. She's actually like an engineer, and she's like, well, if I could, you know, just do A, B, and C, I could actually maybe be a nuclear engineer. And she's like, I could have that as my title. Like, Gemini, you're so smart. You're just smart like that, right? But the funny thing that she's like, I was talking to her about something. She's like, you know, I think you're just bored. I think that's why you're doing it, because you're bored. I'm like, yeah, I think you're right. But she's like, but she was talking about her sweet spot for drama. She's like, you know what I think my sweet spot for drama is? She's like, I like to start drama, but not caused by me. So she's like, there was this one example where she had to go, or they found out someone in the office had like, you know, I don't know if I can say that, you know. She's like, yeah, I found out that they had it, and her boss was like, well, do you want to tell everyone that they have to go home because someone infected the office? And she's like, yes, I would. So she's like the cause of it, but indirectly the cause. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, she didn't actually start it, but she's able to spread the drama through and then watch everybody panic. And I just thought that was so funny, because that's such Gemini energy. Like, you're causing it. You might even stir the pot a little bit, but then you sit back and watch it happen, but you're not actively involved or the cause of it. Does that make sense? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. On that note, I'm gonna head out, and I will say sometimes, Gemini, you are problematic, but, you know, I think that you're just a little bit of spice to your life. So, yeah, but you do like drama. Don't try and bullshit me on that one. And, oh, one more thing I wanted to say about Gemini is that they're really good talkers, and they could, especially if they have a Mercury in Gemini, they could talk their way out of any situation. So you do have to be careful, though, because sometimes they do lie, and they're so confident in their lie. It's almost like their slogan could be like, it's not a lie if you believe it. Right? And they're really selling it to you. So they're really believing their own lies. And you have to be careful with this, though, because you don't want to get double talked by a Gemini. Call them out if you feel like they're bullshitting you, because they actually like you more. If they're telling you a lie and you're not believing it and you're calling them out on it, they're going to be like, wow, like, they're not falling for my bullshit. They must be really smart. So anyway, I'm going to end it there. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great Gemini season.